The kingdom of God is a treasure not only hidden in this world, but when you come across it, would you know how valuable it is? Would you be willing to sell all your other fields, all of your other businesses or houses or cars or stocks in order to buy that field with that treasure in it?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salty Pastor Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping you learn and grow in your faith. We are here to help you navigate life by giving you the tools, knowledge, and skills to make your own decisions. Our goal on the Salty Pastor is to help you grow your faith. We believe that when you pursue Jesus, you become a person who knows what they believe and why they believe it. Someone who is not gullible, easily swayed, naive, immature, or overly sensitive, but someone who wants to navigate life with strength, courage, and confidence. My name is Jesse Maher, but we cannot do the Salty Pastor Podcast without the Salty Pastor himself, Dr. Douglas Peake.
So good to be with you all today. It's just another exciting week as we start to roll in summer, end of May. So this is episode 299 for the Salty Pastor. So on Thursday will be our 300th episode. So that's kind of a little bit of milestone for us.
Yeah, a little bit. And we are currently studying the parables of Jesus because we want to get a firmer grip on the kingdom of God and what it is. Yeah. We want to understand it better, its nature, its essence, where it exists, how it operates, and why we should want to be in it and live in it each and every day. Last week, we started in Matthew chapter 13 with the parable of the weeds, and where Jesus said the world is a field. He planted good seed, and there is a growing kingdom of people here in it. But Satan is also sowing bad seeds, and those people are weeds.
Yeah. And that was such a great place to start because it really explains the great in-between, as we call, and that is that, God created the heavens and the earth, and Adam and Eve were in a perfect place. There wasn't sin, there wasn't evil, there wasn't disease and sickness and all of these types of things. And then there was a fall. We invited evil in. And so how do you redeem that? How do you provide a way to let it start again? Well, there's a final judgment. We know that. That's coming where everything is brought once again under the authority of God the Father, Jesus Christ his Son. So we know that. And so, but what happens in between when people are struggling in this in-between time? And that's when Christ came. He dies on the cross and he plants the seeds of the kingdom. And so the parable of the weeds describes how these two kingdoms are growing in the field of the world at the same time and how we are to look at that. So I think it's kind of a great place to start because all the other parables make more sense now when you realize there's two kingdoms side by side in the world, which is the field.
Absolutely. And this week we're going to be staying in Matthew 13, actually, and studying 4 small parables that have a lot to say about the kingdom of God. The parable of the mustard seed, the leavened bread, the hidden treasure, and the costly pearl. 2 of these parables also appear in Luke 13, right?
Yes, 2 of them do.
So you want to go through these one at a time?
Yeah, let's go through them one at a time. Kind of, even though they're short, they seem to say a lot about the kingdom of God. They may be similar, but the differences are worth noting, and that nuance or whatever, those different angles in which it kind of talks about the kingdom of God, short though it is, gives us a deeper understanding and knowledge of the kingdom of God. So the first one is in verses 31 through 32, and it's kind of interesting. It's kind of right between the parable of the weeds when he told it, and then he gives an explanation. So right in between it, he tells these short little parables. Okay. Yeah. And what's really interesting, why Matthew organized it that way, not quite sure, but I think he felt it was all salient and part of one type of overall point. But verse 31 says this: He presented another parable to them, saying, the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, is like a mustard seed, which is a person took and sowed in his field. So he intentionally planted it. He said, and this is smaller than all the other seeds, but when it is fully grown, it is larger than the garden plants and actually becomes a tree, so that the birds of the sky come and rest or nest in its branches. So I'm not much of a farmer. I don't know if you are.
I was a rancher, but not a farmer.
Not a rancher, yeah. And so mustard seeds, very small. There's all kinds of mustard seeds that you can get, all different kinds of mustard. And it's, when you grind them up, you add a little bit of liquid, and you can create a paste or a cream or whatever. And it gives a flavorful zing to any meal that you're eating. The Germans are particular about their mustard.
Grey Poupon.
Yeah, the French, they have Grey Poupon. It also makes an excellent bonding agent for your barbecue rub on your meat, right? So that works really well. I like that. Very popular seasoning. It's easy to grill. It has multiple varieties. Some varieties grow into plants that are pretty big, but actually there are varieties that grow into a tree. Right? It's not, big, huge, massive thing, but it's a tree. And so that's really quite remarkable. Mustard during the first century was such a common thing and people had used it and they employed it. Salt, mustard, other types of spices and seasonings and so forth, is that it became an idiomatic expression, that they used. And so kind of like today we say, he's a few bricks short of a full load.
Or even just like, I'm going to Google it. Like, I'm going to go and do some research on it. And you're not necessarily using Google, but you're using it as an opportunity to say,
it's
I'll
an
just
idiom.
go figure it out. Right.
Yeah. You say, well, Google it.
I can look it. Yeah.
What am I telling you? I'm telling you we'll go look into it, dig into it. That used to be, we would say, look it up.
Right.
But now we say Google it.
Because you had, encyclopedia salesmen that came around to give you encyclopedias.
And you get your encyclopedia and you'd look it up. You'd find and kind of get in there and look in it. But I think what's really interesting about it is the idiomatic expression here is that because mustard seeds were so small, right? And then they could grow into a tree, the idiom became, you might talk about, a young Jewish girl might talk about her ex-boyfriend that she doesn't like and say, instead of saying he has a pea brain, she would say he has a mustard seed brain.
Right.
So it became that idiomatic expression. And so whenever you wanted to illustrate something small, you'd say, oh, it's like a mustard seed. Well, Jesus uses a common idiomatic expression, wove it into the culture because of a phenomena that everyone is aware of. Everybody knows. Everybody uses mustard. Everybody is involved in it.
That's culturally relevant.
Yeah, super culturally relevant. And so all the people were familiar with it, and he uses it to illustrate something about the nature of the kingdom of God. And I think one of the things that he really digs into here is that the kingdom of God it's very small in some ways. And in the past, what we have said, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday, is that the gospel of Christ, which is the beginning of the kingdom of God, as it's planted in your life as a seed, is that it's just a very simple propositional truth. It's a proposition that whether you believe it or not is your choice. But it starts very small. But what's so amazing is the power of what that propositional truth goes into is self-evident. I was reading of a historian recently who said, it doesn't matter if you believe that Jesus was God. It doesn't matter if you believe in him or not. It was a Harvard history professor, Pelican or something like that. And he said, there's no denying from a historical point of view that Jesus is the most influential character in the world, the history of the world. So even if you don't believe in him or don't like him, it doesn't matter. The influence of this life is far beyond any other human being that has ever existed. So that just kind of shows how, man, this small propositional truth, right, that he said,
right.
And that well, what is that propositional truth? That is, well, you're created in the image of God, but you have cancer. And I came to heal you through giving my life as a ransom for many. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. I am the resurrection and life. If you believe in me, though you will live even though you die, which is an interesting phraseology. But nonetheless, that's the gospel at its core, that there is a God. Okay, you're separated from him and you need to be back in relationship with him. And Jesus Christ made that possible through his death, burial, and resurrection. So I think it's just really an amazing thing to think about, that it's just a small propositional truth, but man, the implications of that are overwhelming.
Absolutely. Well, and what I appreciate again is while these parables are somewhat riddles, they're utilizing, he's not speaking about things that are hard to understand as far as the original things. Like he's a man of the people as far as he wants to communicate at their level. He's not over in the temple or in the synagogues using the big thee, thou, shout, right? Like that we would think about today.
The high-minded
Obviously,
language.
it was back in their time. They were using Hebrew and all of these different other languages, but he was like, let me break it down to something really easy for you to understand. You guys are dealing with mustard seeds on a daily basis. Let's talk about mustard seeds. Like he's utilizing connotations that they can actually wrap their mind around that are not so, but it's still speaking to a much higher thing, but it's a much easier understanding once you know and have the ears to hear what he's actually talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great thing. And it just talks about, wow, it's a small propositional truth that grows into a massive thing in your own personal life, but in the world as well.
Yes, absolutely. So we have to cruise because we're trying to do 4 of these today,
Oh my,
Pastor.
let's keep going. Okay.
Tell me about our next one.
Well, the next one is interesting. It's only one verse, right?
Okay.
It says, he spoke another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven or yeast, which a woman took and hid in 3 sata of flour until it was all leavened. So it's very short, but very interesting, okay? It begins with yeast, otherwise known as leaven. Everyone knows what it does. When it's in flour, okay, it's really interesting because we use this freeze-dried yeast, most people do, and what you have to do is you have to suspend it in water to reactivate it, right? Well, back then what they would do is you have yeast, you can put it in the flour, and it stays in there. It's fine. It's stored one place. People didn't have massive storage opportunities like we do today. They didn't have Tupperware. And so what would happen is it would stay that way until it was activated. How was it activated? Is you would put water, mix in oil and water with and then get warm, and then it would rise. What does it do? Yeast is a bacteria that eats the sugars in the flour, and then it gives off a gas, so it makes it rise up, and then when you bake that baby, it's light and fluffy, and it melts in your mouth.
All these parables talk about food, and this is before lunch when we're recording this, and I'm getting hungry.
I know, it makes me so hungry just thinking about it. So then he says that she put it in 3 sata of flour. So a sata is about 20 pounds of flour. So we're not talking about a daily amount. Most people don't realize is that everybody had a millstone back there in your own home. It'd be similar to like a toaster, or a microwave in your house today.
It was an appliance, quote unquote.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, if you went bankrupt and you had a debtor, they could come and they could take everything. They could take everything except for 2 things. They couldn't take your tunic, right? And they couldn't take your mill. Oh. Yeah. Your millstone. They couldn't take it. What it was is a stone that they'd put a hole in the center of it, right? And then they would put another hole on the side of it, chip it out, put a stick in it, and then it would just spin around on top of another stone. And what you do is you throw it in there and you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And over time, it turns it into flour, and then you kind of take the stone out and blow the chaff away, and that's how it worked. So what these people would do is they would grind just enough flour because of the issue of storage for that day to make 1 loaf of bread. Right. That's pretty much all they do. It's 1 loaf a day. Well, wait a second. We have 60 pounds of flour. That's the equivalent of somewhere between 50 and 80 loaves of bread. So Jesus is making a very quick reference saying, I'm not talking about a little bit of flour, right, for just 1 loaf each day like we all do,
right?
Okay? I'm talking about the stuff that's been ground and is stored to get you through the whole winter, right? So 4 months worth of bread, right? And then he says this, no, she hid the yeast. Okay? Wow, that's really interesting. Why would he say that? Well, the reason why is because there's a massive amount of stored flour. It's used over the course of 4 months. And then what she does is she puts yeast in it. No one knows it's there until liquid is introduced. And then it's placed in a warm spot, and then it works at magic. So what if you wanted to make unleavened bread? Okay, in Jewish culture, unleavened bread was not only a ceremonial bread, but it was a common bread. It was used for all sorts of foods. If you hang around Orthodox Jews very much, you know that they have all kinds of foods in their diet that have the texture of paste, spreads, chopped oily salads, They have all those kinds of things that are similar like to hummus, and they have all these different kinds of things that they have. And so having a hunk of unleavened bread right underneath it would be like a modern day tortilla. I mean, today we got tortillas that, you can make everything from tacos to wraps to burritos to you name it,
Very easy to utilize.
Yeah, it's across the board, easy to use. You can load that baby up and do yourself whatever you want. You're like, oh, see, her not making you more hungry. I'm sorry. But however, what if you grabbed the flour that had yeast in it and you didn't know that? Your unleavened bread would do what? You'd pull it out, you put some water in it, then you set it aside. It's kind of warming in the sun. Then you're prepping your other food. Takes a little longer than we're used to. Food prep used to take tons of time.
Right.
So what happens is you get through to the end of it. And what happens is now you don't have a flat piece of bread like a tortilla. It's ballooning up.
Right.
And you're going, who put yeast in it? That's what's interesting here. You would sit there, scratch your head, and wonder, how in the world did that happen? So what is Jesus saying? And I bring out all this nuance because this is what these people were thinking when they heard the story, right? It's like, well,
context is key.
Yeah. Well, if yeast is in this, you can't use it to make unleavened bread. You can't use it for the ceremonial stuff either. You can't. Oh my goodness! So she took it and hid it in there, and basically now
again, it's not a single day's worth of bread. It's 4 months worth.
Yeah, it's 4 months worth of flour. So, anyway, long and short of it, I think he's trying to say that the kingdom of God is, well, in a way, it's been hidden. Jesus, secretly brings the kingdom of God. Many of the disciples didn't even know until after he rose from the dead what the point was. And he's planning this, and yet it's growing, right? It's having an effect. Or maybe what he's trying to say is that even though you don't see the kingdom of God, it works its way through everything eventually. Or maybe he's saying that it's hidden and it tricks you without knowing it. I don't know about that, but
yeah, that seems questionable.
but anyway, it's kind of interesting. I think that is yeast in the flour that was hidden in a massive storage, and so no matter what, your bread has yeast in it.
Yes, it is propagating its way through there, and it will affect you whether you are aware of it or not, right? I think, just as we move into this third parable, verses 34 and 35 look really interesting to me.
Yeah.
We get in a window into why Jesus is speaking in parables and how often he spoke in parables. So verse 34 says, all these things Jesus spoke to the crowd in parables, and he did not speak anything to them without a parable. This was so that what was spoken through the prophet would be fulfilled. I will open my mouth in parables. I will proclaim things hidden since the foundation of the world. Matthew is once again showing Jesus is fulfilling Old Testament prophecy and therefore must be the Messiah.
Yeah.
And then he drops into the next parable, right? So
Yeah.
Matthew offers some inclination of why these parables are important. Why didn't he just come out and say it, right? Why didn't he just say the things?
Well, he's fulfilling prophecy, but also, isn't it interesting? It says there is that he did not speak anything to them without a parable. So it just shows you how prevalent it was in his teaching.
Right.
So, which takes us to the hidden treasure. Here's another angle of the kingdom of God. Verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid again. And from the joy over finding it, what does he do? He sells everything he has and he buys that field. So this short parable seems pretty straightforward. A man's walking along, right, through a field. He doesn't own the field. Could be a pasture, whatever. Maybe they're growing crops there. We don't know. And he discovers a treasure. Maybe it was a chest or a bag, and it's filled with what? Precious, probably gold and silver,
Right.
and
Things
maybe
worth
even
a lot.
coinage. Wait, yeah, it was a treasure. So it wasn't a small amount like, "Ooh, I found $20." No, it was a massive treasure. I mean, it was worth an enormous amount of money. But the owner of the field didn't know that. And so he goes, takes everything he owned, and he buys that field from the owner because he's like, this is the best. No matter what I pay for it, it's just
Worth it.
paltry
Right.
compared to that. Now he owns the treasure. So what is Jesus trying to say? Well, one obvious point is that the kingdom of God is more valuable than anything else in this world, right? No matter what you use it is a treasure. And remember, in the same chapter, just previously, he told the parable of the tares, and he says the field is the world.
Right.
So maybe Matthew's trying to say this is how
Tying them
Jesus
together.
connected it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. He also went on to say that the kingdom of God is a treasure not only hidden in this world, but when you come across it, would you know how valuable it is? Would you be willing to sell all your other fields, all of your other businesses or houses or cars or stocks in order to buy that field with that treasure in it? It is so, wow, do you understand the value of what you have found? From even in a deeper level, I think if the world is a field, Satan has been planting in these fields over and over, and now the kingdom of God is a hidden treasure in his field. I don't want to overstate this case, but just let's think about this for a second. What if that's a sub-meaning, and that is, well, the treasure is the kingdom of God, right? And it's in the field of the world. Most people don't discover it.
Right.
But once you discover it, when they see it, they're willing to give up everything Satan has to offer them in order to be in the kingdom of God. It's like that is so much worth than anything else that Satan has offered me up to this point.
Yeah, I think, again, he's utilizing something that everyone can understand and talking about something that is relatable. It's like, yeah. If you were walking along a road and you tripped, stumbled, and found this treasure, you'd be like, oh, I gotta get this field so that I can get this treasure, right? It's completely worth sacrificing anything I have in order to obtain this thing that will be infinitely more valuable than what I currently have, right? And that's a process, but it's an easy to understand thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you knew you could get a lottery ticket if you bought, 50 tickets, but you only, you had to spend all the money you had in order to get those 50 tickets, but you knew you'd win the lottery, then you would probably do it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to give up. Like
one of them is guaranteed.
Yeah. It's like you knew one of those tickets was worth millions of dollars. Then it's like, yeah, you'd spend everything you had to get that thing if you knew for a fact that it was what it says it was. Lotteries, the metaphor falls apart in some aspects.
Yes.
But
all metaphors do.
Yes.
But I think it's a really great point that you're making there, and that is the significant point is, do we understand value? So even though you don't own the field, even though you don't know God, even though you don't know Jesus, oftentimes the kingdom of God, resonates with you. You know the value of it. And number two, I think it's really important to understand is that are you willing to give up the other stuff you have? That means you already have stuff. It is providing, right? But is it really worth that?
Right.
So spiritually, and so these people are hearing these words, right? And these are very material, hands-on, feet in the dirt type of thing. And now he's speaking that, and so you're starting to think, so what exactly is he talking about? Especially, remember, the context is this is written to Jews, and the Jews have heard over and over and over again that the kingdom of God is what? It's a physical place.
Right.
And so now he's talking like that, and they're like scratching their heads.
They're like,
how does this all
completely
fit?
Different. What does the last parable imply to us as far as the kingdom of heaven?
Well, it's another real short one. He goes, again, the kingdom of God or kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking fine pearls, and upon finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold everything that he had and bought it. So this parable puts a little different angle on the value of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. It begins with a merchant who deals in pearls, right? So this merchant knows his business. He knows, right? He has been a seeker of fine pearls, so he knows what he's looking for. It's similar to those guys. You ever seen one of those reality shows that I watch? They go into old barns, and all I see in this barn is junk, right? And they walk around, but because this is their business, they're going, oh, well, this machine is this, and it's an antique, and it's worth $10,000,
Right.
once you fix it up and clean it up. And then you go to another, oh, look at this old car, this old buggy, or, and pretty soon you start to get excited, and then they walk up to this thing, and you go, oh, that's worth $5,000 because that's this. And he goes, oh, well, that's a piece of junk. It's not worth anything.
Right.
So, I don't really know what's going on, but they do because it's their business, right? So what if this merchant comes because he knows his business? He sees the coup de grace, the magnus, the most important thing is a pearl that's unlike any other pearl. And he knows its value. He knows what it is. It's the ultimate thing. So he sells every other pearl he has, every fine stone he has to do what? Buy the one pearl. So what does Jesus mean by this? And that is, I think we could have lots of implications, but that is the kingdom of God outweighs any other promise here on earth. And even people who are pursuing life and want the most out of life fall short, right? You might get fine pearls, but you're never going to have the ultimate one until you're in the kingdom of God. There are many people looking for spiritual answers, and they find some solace in that pursuit. I've said that any belief system is based on some reality of truth. It's just not the ultimate truth. They never seem to be exactly what they desire until they come across the kingdom of God. I think the primary reason why Christianity won the Roman Empire over is because the kingdom of God was the pearl of great price. The Romans were very spiritual people. They pursued these pagan deities. They built temples like crazy. They had whole manufacturing, like Ephesus was a manufacturing hub for idols for all the pagan deities, and it was a huge business. And that's why they persecuted Paul. They were worried, man, he's going to get rid of all of our business. We don't like that. So the issue is that they're very spiritual people, but the Romans never had the perfect pearl until they heard the gospel message. And they found the greatest pearl of worth in the kingdom of God. All the pagan stuff wasn't enough. Then the kingdom of God became everything they had ever hoped for. So that tells us that when people are seeking, right, they're seeking to quench a thirst of their soul. And when we help them find the kingdom of God, they're finding the pearl of great price. They're finding the ultimate satisfier of the thirst of their soul, the wellspring that comes in and basically quenches their soul thirst. And so I think all of these parables kind of give you a different angle on this truth. The kingdom of God and its value far outweighs everything else, right? But it doesn't take much, does it?
Right.
In order for it to grow, it doesn't take much to permeate and influence everything. It doesn't take much to see how valuable it really is. And even for those who know their business, it doesn't take, to see this is the ultimate promise I have been looking for. This is what the kingdom of God is like. It's not a geographical position, but it's something bigger, greater, more subtle, and more powerful than you could ever imagine.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Pastor, for sharing these 4 parables. I'm excited to talk about them on Thursday and how they are applicable to our lives today, because obviously a lot of these things were references for people of the time and the context that they had, and sometimes we need to bring it forward a little bit to understand it a little bit more. And we're also going to be celebrating our 300th episode while we discuss these parables, so that's going to be exciting. Thank you guys so much for joining us for 299 episodes, and we'll see you on Thursday here on the Salty Pastor Podcast. The Salty Pastor Podcast is produced by Foothills Christian Church and filmed at Foothills Christian Church. It is hosted by Jesse Maher and Dr. Douglas Peake. Editing by Finn Lawler.